All right. Welcome and hello to the first Wikimedia Foundation deployment training thing in a very long time. So I guess I'll just do quick introductions about who's going to be talking today. Hi, I'm Greg. That is Brian Davis right there waiting, and that is Max. We will be your lovely guides today and answering questions. This is going to be kind of loosey-goosey, free-form kind of thing, so if there are questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I might have to take a second and squint my eyes and read them because they're on a screen way far away, but I will try to answer them as quickly as possible. I probably won't be watching IRC for those of you on IRC, just because it's hard. So yeah, with that, I'm going to start talking. Let's see. So you all just see the video. Share screen. Why not? Let's share that. And I have no idea what that. Deny. Open. Google. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do in this window.
Padlock. Padlock. Click on padlock.
Oh gosh. Sorry, everyone. No, cancel. Can't do it. Don't have a password. All right.
Share it from your laptop.
I guess so. I gotta join. Oh wait. Chris McMahon, can you see the Etherpad?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. All right, then we will just go ahead. I was confused by OSX. All right. So topics, background on getting things deployed. So this is the before you actually need to start typing things in the terminal area. This is the social part of getting things deployed, the planning part of getting things deployed. I'm going to first scare you with a big table. No worries. So this, let me scroll down. This, we just started a little ago. This is a huge table of crazy messiness. You don't need to look at it too in detail right now. I will pinpoint some things, make things a little bigger so you can actually read it. So right, for example, so this is just a very basic schedule of things going out, when, who, and what, right? Your basic kind of schedule. So this is the week of June 2nd. We are today's Wednesday, right? It's 11 a.m. Pacific, aka 18 UTC right now. You can see the thing that is going on is this session right now. Actually, we put someone needs to mute. We put a window in here for us to do, because we're going to be doing some deployments during the training so that other people don't step on our toes and we don't step on their toes. This is who it is, so Max and Brian. It includes both their IRC nicks and real names. Well, not in Brian's case, because
I don't have a real name.
he doesn't have a real name. And over here would be what patches would be, deployed, or what things will be deployed. Usually when you see patches to be listed, that means it's a window like zeros that's kind of held each week for them just in case, or parsoid, it's held just in case. In the case of this deployment training, we'll put them up later so you can look at them. Or a good example are the SWAT deploys, which I'll talk about later, where you have who and what they're deploying. So this is the schedule. If you're ever curious about what is being deployed when, if you know something's going to be going out in the next couple weeks and you want to be around for it, check this page. It's on Wikitech. It's just /deployments. It's on Wikitech because we need this page to be available in the event that we break the cluster. We need to know what happened. So it's not. So for those who don't know, Wikitech is not on the main cluster. It's on a separate virtual machine that will hopefully not also fall over at the same time as the cluster.
Also, it's probably somewhere in the same cluster.
It's in the same data center.
Yes.
So if there was a geophysical event like an earthquake or hurricane or something of the sort, then we're SOL.
We have Wikitext static though.
We do have Wikitext static, which gets synced every now and then. Whatever. But that's on Rackspace.
So it was safer when it was in Mark's basement or whatever.
Sure. Well, we're getting down, so no worries. We'll have it mirrored. Yeah. So that's why it's here on Wikitech. Let's see. What should I talk about next? So basically, scheduling. The easiest approach is just email me. I can make sure that all the I's are crossed and T's are dotted, and we can get everything lined up that way. It doesn't take too much time from my side. But for information about what kinds of things you should schedule versus not schedule, I have a big bulleted list there of inclusion criteria. So if the thing that you're wanting to deploy meets this threshold of change, then schedule it. Better safe than sorry for a lot of things. Examples are like a beta feature going out or being enabled as default. Anything about cookies, because cookies can do bad things to caching, etc. That kind of stuff. This is not a complete list, so use your judgment. Again, err on the side of caution. You can always wait a week. It's not a huge deal. Is someone going to say something, or should they mute? All right. So one reason for why we schedule, in addition to just not stepping on each other's toes, is for communication purposes. For me, it's actually one of the more important reasons why we schedule things. Every week, we being the engineering managers, get together and review the next week's list of deployments and go through them and kind of sanity check things. Just very quick sanity check. The meeting takes like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's not very in-depth. It's mostly just, this is the high-level stuff of what's going out. But in that, I also send out an email to the community, which gets picked up by the Tech News crew of people. And that means that anything that's important or interesting gets communicated out for you, basically. So for most things, this is enough. For much larger things, like if we wanted to enable Visual Editor by default everywhere on English Wikipedia, then that would require a little bit more communication. But for most things, this is the minimum and enough, sufficient and what's the other word? Whatever, necessary. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why. Let me go back to my notes to make sure. And how are we doing on time? 12. All right. So that's the basic outline for getting your things scheduled and what to schedule. For those of you that are going to be deploying new extensions, this is the page you want to look at. This is on MediaWiki. And it's called Review Queue because literally this page used to be a bulleted list of things that Roan or Reedy had to review before it went out. Now instead of using a bulleted page on a wiki, we have a tracking bug in Bugzilla to know what things are wanting to go out and need review. We'll take a quick look at that just so you get an idea of what it looks like. These are all bugs representing extensions that want to be deployed. So there's a huge queue. There's always people that want to get things out. We do. How often? How often? Once a week-ish things go out, new extensions. The time delay between requesting a new extension and it getting deployed, it depends on a lot of factors. Best case scenario, 2 weeks. Basically just give enough time for people to do the checklist, which is the things that take a lot of time are performance and security reviews. All new code that's going out needs to have a security review and a performance review, just for good reasons. Chris Stipe is our main security review person. He's our lead security guy, and he is only one guy, unfortunately.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of when he can
get to it. Yeah. If there's something that is more front end versus back end, then we can maybe pawn that off to Timo. But for now, it's mostly Chris. Hello. So yeah, if you want a new extension deployed, basic process is just file a bug, and I'll copy paste this checklist into it, and so we know where we're at. And Brian and Max will talk about actually deploying new extensions, which is different. One thing to also note is schema changes. So if what you're doing involves database changes at all, you need to plan that, get it reviewed by someone, aka Springle, Sean Pringle, who will be doing the actual changes to the databases, because we have lots of databases. We have many masters and many slaves. So it's not a simple operation always. And also something to keep in mind is if you're writing your code for the new changes for the database, make sure your code is backwards compatible, because there is no, except for special circumstances, you can't really depend on a minute time frame when something is going to change over. It can be weeks that a schema change happens throughout. So stuff needs to be backwards compatible. There'll be a point when it's done and you can remove the backwards compatibility, but make sure that you don't break your stuff. Again, same kind of process, file a bug, we'll review it. There's a tracking bug right there at the bottom. Yeah, so that's basically the high-level information on deployments. Let me go back to the Hangout window. Are there any questions at this point? I see silence. I think most everybody's here for the second part of the talk, which is not me. Good. All right. So.
Surprise, it's Rowan.
Right. Exactly. How do you guys? So handoff. Who am I handing off to?
Not me.
Not you.
I didn't prepare for this at all. I woke up an hour ago.
Just another short administrative addition.
Yes.
You should not be deploying some stuff if you are not ready to fix it if shit hits fan.
That's a good point. Where is that page? On deployments.
Just to double check.
Yeah.
Just to double check the difference between Beta Labs extension deployment and production hasn't been covered, or has been?
Has not been covered. From my perspective, from the scheduling and communication type perspective, that is much less stringent. Enabling a new extension on Beta Cluster doesn't have as high of a bar as being on production. You can do it whenever. The code should be reviewed to some extent, but it doesn't need to be the final thing, right? And Beta Cluster, as people should know on this call, is always updating anyways. So it's not like it's out of the ordinary to do something on the Beta Cluster sometime during the day. The hardest part is that you need +2 in the public config to get the change to happen, because that's where the... No? You don't need to change the Dash Labs?
Someone needs to mute their laptop.
Anyways, there's just issues with making sure it's reviewed before you get it out, but it should be pretty simple.
Just one note, something that I just ran in with Max, trying to deploy 2 of my new extensions to Beta Labs. Unfortunately, the configuration is fairly interwoven, like the production and Beta Labs, so it could be in times a bit more difficult to cleanly deploy something on Beta Labs without touching production files.
I will also note that extensions on Beta Labs should only go to Beta Labs when they have a release date for production. That's been our rule of thumb, is that we don't support arbitrary extensions on Beta Labs. We only support the extensions that are destined for a production release.
Correct.
Yep. Thanks, Yuri and Chris. Yeah. What did you brought up the point of? Oh yeah, staying around. When you deploy things, that's a good thing to point out, is don't deploy and run. Things sometimes take a while to show up in problems, sometimes take a while to show up. This is why we usually just schedule an hour window as opposed to 10 minutes, which is usually all it takes to actually sync out a file, a change. But an hour gives you enough time to watch logs and do all that stuff that Brian and Max will talk about. But sometimes it does take a while for issues to show up. So don't run, stay around. Even if you're not actually the deployer, if, like example, you are not deploying but you added something to the SWAT window, which I'll go over real quickly since I didn't talk about it. SWATs are basically, hey, I have something I want to deploy, but I'm not a deployer. Come to this window, add your changes, and one of the nice people on the list will do that for you. But for them to do that for you, you need to be online on IRC, pingable, responding, and available for troubleshooting any issues that happen when they deploy your changes. Otherwise, they will not deploy them. They will just skip them and move on. So yeah, no issue if you're not there. If you get sick, who cares? I mean, sorry you're sick, but if you're not there, it's not like you're getting dinged or anything like that. We'll just skip it and delay it till later. Yeah. Okay, hand up. Max. Brian pointed to Max.
Well, so Max was going to do some. I thought you were going to tell us how SCAP works.
We want to do how SCAP works first? We can totally do that. SCAP works by magic. Pixies fly throughout the ether, and so SCAP is the master deployments.
Sorry. Chris, confirmation. What do you see on your screen?
I see the meeting room, but I don't see a shared.
Okay. How do I focus you? How do I say make Brian?
We have both, so that the meeting room and the screen can be shared, like can be seen at the same time.
Let's
Someone else.
Actually, Chris can see whatever
yeah. So
can there be, but what we see on the screen is what gets on YouTube. So I think it's fine.
Yeah.
oh, so this is what's being recorded.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So everyone that's watching right now, make sure like that's on the actual Hangout. Click on Brian's name. He is second from the left. You'll see his screen. Those watching the YouTube stream or archive, you should be seeing it because I selected it. So, okay, sorry.
Yeah, in general, I think that it's the loudest participant who's focused by default, and sound is coming from Greg. That's why everyone sees Greg by default.
Yep.
True story.
All right, sorry.
That's all right. What was I saying? Okay, SCAP. SCAP
Something on Pixies.
is, yes, Pixies and Magic and Fairy Dust and Python and SSH.
And these pixies are drunk sometimes.
They are very often, well, they're pixies, right? Like, pixies like to party. That's just how they roll. So SCAP stands for Sync Common All PHP, which meant something at some time when the name was invented. And now,
Times immemorial.
yeah, now let's just say SCAP stands for SCAP. Fundamentally, what SCAP is, it's a set of scripts that let us take a prepared directory structure that's on a deployment server, which in production is the server named Tin, and in beta is the server named Deployment Bastion, and replicate the prepared directory structure across the rest of the target cluster. It does this using SSH and rsync. There's a lot of kind of intermediate steps that could be gone into in gory detail, but would be really boring for this particular discussion, I think. But so SCAP is used. Sam or myself or Chad or whoever draws the short straw for doing a Thursday train deploy uses the SCAP program to push a brand new branch of MediaWiki and the updated localization files for that branch out onto the cluster.
Real quickly, I didn't point that out either, is the deployment train, for that word that you might not know. It's the release of the software through the various wiki groups. So just real quickly, on Thursday morning, we go to Test Wikis, which is test2, MediaWiki.org, Login Wiki, and Test Wikidata. And then Tuesday, the following Tuesday, we go to non-Wikipedias, so Commons, Wiktionary, etc. And then the following Thursday, so a week later, we go to all the Wikipedias all at once. So yeah, on Thursday, it's a double deploy day in that respect. Sorry.
So I think the best thing to do for SCAP right now at this point is just to show you what it would look like to do one. So my window down here is logged into the beta cluster. I am not logged into production. This should not melt production. If it melts production, it's Max's fault, and Rowan's here to fix it for us. Nobody but me would ever want to do this in beta, so this is just to show you how to do it. But basically what you would do in the production environment, you'd log into 10 and you'd go to the directory /a/common. Hysterical reasons why it's /a/common, but this is the directory that will be delivered. It's huge.
Is it? I know. Whatever, it might be big enough for people on personal computers. Not in a presentation. That's probably good.
That better?
Yeah. There's a.
Okay, so you go to /a common and you do stuff. There's a really long checklist I can give you a link to later that is the stuff that you would do in a common if you're doing the Thursday train deploy. Max will show us some more practical things for kind of SWAT style deploys later that would be done in a common. But you go to a common, you get the directory all set up. You make sure that the Git state there looks like you want it to look, and that there's not unversioned things that you don't expect to be there and whatever and whatever. And then when you're ready to deploy, when you're ready to run SCAP, you really literally type SCAP, and then you type something like a description of why you're running the SCAP. So I'm doing a SCAP for deployment training. And you hit enter. And then things happen. 6 months ago, if you'd seen this screen, things would now be streaming by at 100,000 miles an hour and you wouldn't have any idea what was going on and why. And then it would randomly pause for 5 to 7 minutes and then more stuff would stream by. Today we've got a little better user interface, I hope, on the command line, and it will give you some progress bars, give you some informational messages about what's going on. And hey, this time it didn't even break, so I don't get to show you what it looks like when something goes wrong. But if something breaks, it'll give you some pretty nicely highlighted in orange and red error messages that may be slightly cryptic, but probably if you paste them into IRC, I can help you figure it out, or somebody else can help you figure it out what went wrong.
I can shut down one Apache so that we could see an error.
Yeah, let's not do that.
I'm amazed that Alpha SCAP now fits on your screen.
Yeah, look at that.
Which, by the way, great job on reforming our horrible deployment scripts. I'm very grateful for that. Is it now recommended that for SWAT style deployments you could use SCAP as opposed to sync file or sync whatever?
I'm not going to say that it's recommended, but I'm going to say you shouldn't be afraid of it. If you're doing any kind of complicated SWAT deploy and you've got 4 or 5 files or a couple directories, or if there is any question at all about whether localization has changed, just go ahead and run SCAP. SCAP has kind of a horrible reputation around the foundation for being slow and hard to understand. Hopefully I fixed the hard to understand part. The slow part, I'm going to have to say it depends. But the worst case-ish scenario for a brand new branch deploy on Thursday is about 22 to 27 minutes, which is a long time, but at least now it gives you progress indicators that says, like, I've finished 197 of 283 servers, and I'm going to keep going, which is a little better than back in the olden days.
Oh, back in the old days, you would have to use the top in command line expanded mode to see which servers it was at, and you would have to have a mental model of which order it processed the servers in, which, of course, if you're an experienced deployer, you would know all these things. But it wasn't very user-friendly.
What else should anybody know about SCAP other than that's basically what you need to do to run SCAP?
Does SCAP always sync the entire tree, or can it sync a subdirectory?
SCAP syncs the entire tree, so it's sync common all PHP. So everything that's under a common will be sent out to all the servers. So that updates the active and the inactive, which let's not talk about that, but all the files that are there, plus it will, before the sync, it will ensure that the localization caches are updated. You can see here, updating localization cache for master using 2 threads on this system. I think it uses 4 threads or 6 threads in production. But here that took 7 seconds. If there had actually been changes to, like, if a new keyword had been added somewhere, that particular part right there would take about 7 minutes in production for it to finish and build the caches. So there's an analogous script. If you just need to sync a directory, there is a script called sync file or sync dir. Which clearly.
When deploying a specific extension, is it possible to do sync dir with message scapping for just that one extension, or do I just always have to use SCAP if I want to update messages?
You always need to use SCAP if you want to update messages.
Also, it's my understanding that it's a goal that we can get to a place where we can always use SCAP without being surfeited. The only reason we have sync dir and sync file historically is because SCAP used to be incredibly slow. It used to run for like more than an hour. And that should now be a thing of the past.
Am I not here? I can see me.
I can't see your screen anyway.
That's weird. Yeah.
You can see me.
You can see your screen.
I can see me now. You still can't see me. I love Google Hangouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone.
I'll be right back.
Meanwhile, I can do some other stuff.
Yeah, like how to deploy code or whatever.
Okay, so the easy part, configuration change. So we have this configuration change in Garrett. We want to deploy it to production. So first we merge it.
Can you tell us what was in the configuration change, high level?
This is some URIs changes that are pretty safe. Basically, they remove one configuration setting. That's not used anymore.
This is wiki configuration, right? Not Puppet.
Yeah.
Correct.
Wiki configuration is not in Puppet, it's in a separate repository called operation/mediawiki-config. So Puppet is an Opsaran repository where mortals can merge themselves. It would be a bit inconvenient to store MediaWiki config there. Okay, so
We do, by the way, have a soft and maybe not entirely black policy that when you do merge things in this repo, you deploy them.
yes,
So
I was
that
going
it
to touch
remains
it.
a reflection of what's in the cluster. And in fact, there's a Jenkins job that as soon as something gets merged, also deploys it in the beta cluster. Which is nice because for like common settings -beta, you can just merge the change and it's just there.
Okay, since we are talking about deployment in production, you have to be on Wikimedia Operations channel and Wikimedia Tech, because that's the places where people will yell at you if you break something. This is actually very important. Also, before deploying, it's really good to be in a while in the operations channel just to see if something is melting, crashing, whatever, and not deploy if there are problems. So let's see if this change has been merged already. It is. So now we go to production. I'm already logged in on Bastion. So from here we SSH to Tin. Tin is our deployment server. Not that I SSH with agent forwarding.
Tin.xen.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thanks.
That is agent. Sheesh.
Now I was logged in into Bastion, then laptop went to sleep and it all died. Okay, so now on Bastion.
If you need help with your SSH config, we can help with that.
Yes, it shouldn't be part of this
No.
training. I just saying that I'm forwarding agent, which is unfortunate, but that's the only way it can currently work. Go to A common, the thing Brian told you about. See if there are unmerged and presumably undeployed changes. So with config changes, it's if you see something undeployed, you can revert it on site, unless it looks like reverting it would break something. So then we compare what is currently deployed with what is currently in master of MediaWiki config to see what we're actually going to deploy. So we see only changes from the revision we want to deploy here. So it should be safe to sync. Now we actually sync all the changes. So now I'm going to sync dir wmf config.
You don't use scan.
Whomever has laptop not muted, please mute it.
I think it was your first second.
Yeah.
Sorry, we didn't hear you.
I believe he was asking that you don't use SCAP.
No, I'm just deploying a configuration change, and it's faster without SCAP. And actually, Brian has made it much faster, so we have actually less incentives to use SCAP.
What was Max, what was the Git command that you used to both update and show the diff at the same time?
I never remember it myself. I just go to Wikitech and type how to do a configuration change. And here is this command.
Oh, okay. You just run them both with end. Okay.
Yeah. Wasn't it you who wrote this?
No, not that one.
All right, so.
Well, maybe. I don't think I did.
Anyway, going back to deployment, I would just press enter.
Oh.
Yeah,
when have you guys changed SyncDirt?
Last week.
Last Friday.
It was announced. Okay, and we have actually one failure.
Nice.
1151.
Oh,
that server died.
That's the
Yeah,
best.
1151's known broken today.
So sometimes you'll see stuff like this, where it's going to say a server failed to sync, and there might be known down servers. So just complain in IRC, and someone like Brian or myself will be like, yeah, we know. Ignore it.
This is better. It used to be too. There used to be at least 6 non-broken servers at a given time.
Anyway, now there is another important part of deploying stuff. We check if we broke something. Yuri, can you verify that production is actually alive, since it's your change?
Checking. Looks good to me.
Thank you. Another very common thing to know is how to deploy extension updates. So we have changed to some extensions master branch, and we need to get it live or into production right now. So first we need to know which branches are actually deployed in production. So we go to noc.wikimedia.org, look up server configuration and wikiversions.json here. So we see that we have 2 branches, 124 WMF6 and WMF7. And for deployment, every extension has branches that correspond to these branches. So we go to extension and cherry pick it to deployment branches. merge the cherry pick. Okay, now I'm cherry picking into another WMF branch. It's already merged.
So that may have gone by quickly. What he just did was he merged and mastered, but then backported to the versions that are live on production. Because master's not on production, right? It's deployed versions that we make branches. So he backported that as an important backport to do ASAP.
You do that for all branches that are listed in the wiki versions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should just be 2 of them.
Yeah. In some cases, you'll only need one because it might be that the thing that you're cherry picking was already in one of them, but just not in the other. You discovered later on that it was actually important, like more important than you really thought.
Right.
Or the bug was introduced in one of the branches, but not in the.
Yeah, and it wasn't present in the other. It's regression or whatever.
Yeah.
This kind of I say this because this kind of thing happens to me all the time.
Okay, now a bit of Git magic.
This is the stuff that I actually write down.
Yes. So I personally have a separate MediaWiki checkout for deployment, but it's not strictly required, and you can use just the same checkout you use for development.
I recommend using a separate one unless you know what you're doing.
Yes. Okay, so we've updated. Now we need to create a local copies of those branches. So git branch -- track.
Oh, you don't have a Garrett remote. Because you have because you have only one remote, if you just try to check out the branches if it already exists, it'll get you know what you mean.
Yes, but explicit branch creation will work for you
regardless of your setups. Yes.
Well, the same stuff for WMF7.
The 2 live branches.
Yes. Now we checked out the particular deployment branch. Changing to extension directory and making sure that it has the needed revision. So fetch. Now we've checked out a particular revision that's at the top of that extension's deployment branch. Let's verify it. Okay, so here is the revision that we were going to deploy, so it's okay. cd back to MediaWiki root. Now we're just committing this change. This is essentially a submodule change. So.
Max, I'm sorry. Does geodata extension, is it on master or is it on?
All extensions are in their state that's deployed on production are always in WMF branches. So we have 2 branches deployed in production at the moment, WMF6 and WMF7.
Yeah, so if that doesn't make complete sense to everyone, the context around that is during every deploy, we not only branch core, but also all the extensions that are deployed. So you can follow along the various WMF branches for any extension every week. If there's been, I mean, there's a new branch, whether or not there's changes.
Okay, now I'm just committing it. And sending it for review. Come on, here. Now do the same for another deployment branch.
So that part that Max did where he did the git add at the root of the checkout branch and then committed it, that's the easiest step to forget when you're updating a submodule.
Also, if you do it with git commit-a, you will get several hundred submodule changes, not actually related to what you want. So you might be shot at that point.
Only if you actually.
Unless you update submodules before you do all other stuff.
Yeah. That's slow enough, though, that we usually don't bother.
And if you're ready, you just do this all live on 10. But not recommended for mere mortals.
Also, what I'm currently doing, which is going back in history and repeating, is also not quite recommended because it makes it easier to forget a step and then now we have to cherry pick commits because they involve only submodule change. I just skip the usual Jenkins runs and merge it manually just to save some time.
I'll throw in here, normally you would never ever want to merge and submit. You will always want Jenkins to reverse the commit for you.
Yes, but
I know, I'm just marking it for posterity.
It's also, you can say that, but especially in deploying branches for extensions, Jenkins is often misconfigured. I know this isn't a great excuse, but Jenkins runs for some module updates and other things doing branches are probably.
Okay, where possible, you have to know your repositories, but where possible, Jenkins should run the tests and merge it.
Exactly. By default.
And I should bother Timo about how it's all broken in the Visual Editor repository. I never do that.
Because Visual Editor.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we have two repositories with similar names, and it's so confusing to every single piece of infrastructure.
Okay, now back to Tin. I just go to branches directory. Cool stuff.
Shouldn't you have done the fetch and the log to make sure there wasn't anything else not deployed?
Yes, we can run the diff, but diff will be against core, and because I'm going to deploy only one extension.
Oh, that doesn't do what you think it is. Oh, actually, it does because some modules, of course.
Yeah, that's always the case. So
yes, because submodules.
Yeah.
So one thing I would highly encourage anybody who's going to be a deployer, learn a whole lot about Git. Some of the nastiest things that can happen to you are Git doing something you didn't expect it to do, and so get comfortable with Git and get comfortable with asking for help on IRC if you're not comfortable with Git. Roan, Sam, Chad are all good people to beg for help from if something on Tin ends up not looking like you expected it to look.
Or on your local machine for that matter, or in Garrett, or anywhere along the line. Yeah. It's surprising, well, maybe not surprisingly, but it's disturbingly easy to shoot yourself in the foot. If you follow on instructions, it shouldn't happen. If you know what you're doing, it also shouldn't happen. Unfortunately, it's not that easy to get to this place where you know what you're doing, which is why we have such few people to do.
Also, you can just forget about this little command, skip a step, and
yeah. Yeah, no, actually, even the people that Brian just declared as being Git masters miss steps and make mistakes all the time. The really difficult thing is recovering from those kinds of things is where you actually need to know what you're doing as opposed to being able to read instructions, and that's sometimes a bit scary. So read your instructions closely, follow them.
Yeah, for most of the things that you do during your deploy, there is a list of almost copy-pastable commands on how to deploy code.
And the first few times you really want to just copy-paste. And just don't forget to update things that need to be updated.
Make them enough versions.
Yes. Okay, now returning to deployment. Now we just update this submodule. CD back and Sindir it.
One thing to mention, unless it got changed recently, is that syncdir doesn't actually use relative paths. It uses paths relative to a common, always.
Oh,
That didn't actually change recently. It's quote unquote always been the case.
Oh yeah, I meant unless Brian fixed it like last week, so that it was actually relative or something.
I did not. I left the legacy behavior so that nobody would freak out.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is counterintuitive about all the sync commands. All the paths are relative to a common. So I think in the documentation it write like, for the sake of your sanity, before you start running those commands, cd back to there so that tab completion works the way you think it will. Because we have not yet written bash completion rules that are aware of this problem. And no, Brian, that was not an encouragement. You should write them.
Okay, returning. I'll do the same to WMF7. I've already pulled stuff. Then you can even CD to that.
We're trying to revive it. Sorry, I should say 99%.
Log seems fine, so CD back and just sync direct. Okay, it's deployed. Sometimes when you have resource changes like CSS or JS, resource loader might decide that it might forget to update something. You might end up in inconsistent state. This happened very rarely recently, but still, if you see that problem, you just go to extensions directory and touch all the files like
What went wrong?
Is it an if suppose case?
So suppose reloader doesn't notice that you change things.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just touch every file and sync direct again.
Did we already do the thing about automatically touching local settings with PHP?
Yeah.
Yeah, this,
Okay, so
this is not
that's-
about local settings,
Yeah.
it's about...
Okay, that's the other thing that came to
Files.
mind, but that's apparently that's something we fixed. Nice.
Yes, so SCAP and all of the sync -star scripts now touch local settings on each host after the sync happens.
That's very good. That should completely eliminate configuration cache problems.
One would hope. Yeah. But when in doubt, touch local settings and sync again.
Yeah. Yeah, there is some other touch tricks which, if you run into trouble with them, you can ask people. But another common one is there is a bug in Reloader that makes it so that if you add configuration variables to be exported, or if you change their values, then sometimes it doesn't happen correctly, and then you need to start up .js file, which is also interesting. It's in resources startup.js. We should probably document this and maybe call the page "No Touching" in all caps or something.
So
we don't have enough REST development references in our documentation. Sorry.
Anybody wants to know about something? Questions, suggestions? OMG, this is terrible. These comments are also welcome. I don't hear you.
Would the touch workaround have any impact on like HTTP caching or anything for like assets?
Yes, it will invalidate the resource loader modules that are used by the extension you've touched, so there might be a bit of spike on bits, but in general, you have to invalidate like every resource loader module in order to create a problem for the cluster.
Yeah. So to give some context, every Thursday we're doing a lot of cache invalidation and new resources, right, with a new deploy. And that usually over the last number of weeks has caused a spike in our bits cluster. So bits, for those that don't know, are the set of servers that serve resource loader, basically, CSS and JS. In the future, as in next week, that will be gone. So your risk of on the back end. Right. Resource loader will still be here.
And this will still exist.
But the pool of servers will be basically subsumed into the big bang all pool of servers. So it shouldn't actually cause any issues. But there'll still be a spike, but it'll be minimized because it's distributed among an order of magnitude more, 2 orders of magnitude more number of servers.
Questions?
The bits domain. Sorry, I was just answering Yuri in the chat. The bits domain is still there. It's just it'll point directly to the application cluster, the big one.
Yeah, the bits domain will also still have a separate varnish cluster. It'll just the backend cluster will be the same.
Right.
So I was going to ask, the sync that happens behind the scenes, is it atomic or is it an rsync of some kind?
It is an rsync that attempts to be as atomic as you can make an rsync. So it does the it's got the delay update flags turned on, but it is not atomic like sync to a new directory and then flop a sibling, unfortunately.
Yeah, because in my previous job we had the same issue where we're using rsync and we had bugs that manifested themselves during deploys because the status of the code base was half the old one and half the new one. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah, we have very many things like the 5 minutes of resource loader doom while the resource loader cache expires, and sometimes people will, like if you tail the exception and fatal logs during a deploy, occasionally you'll see someone who attempts to load a class that is no longer there or has a different definition. Like, it happens, you see it.
Yeah, the current state typically causes the most problems with resource loader. There can get really weird things can happen, unfortunately.
Now, why not sync to a new directory and then flop the symlink?
Just because we haven't rewritten the code to do that yet.
Okay.
One of the issues, so the whole tree that's synced, if you look at the amount of files that are in a common, it's big as hell. So,
is there disk space available on the target?
Not on all of them.
Because if you just clone the whole directory and then sync to the new clone.
Yeah, there's an rsync flag that will clone hard links too, so it will just hard link all the files in the directory. It still takes a while because creating directories is sometimes non-trivial, but it's a lot faster. It doesn't actually use up any disk space. Make a new directory tree, which is all hard link your old files, except for the new files, which rsync makes over, and then you can flip over and then delete your old directory.
I think one of the anticipated challenges in this too was the way that APC does cache invalidation. If you end up changing the paths of the PHP files you run a lot and have like more than 2 variants of them, invalidation will happen more often than you want it to, and cache memory consumption will be much higher than what it should be, which causes turnover and thrashing and which triggers APC's propensity for corrupting everything.
You always use the same path, but the root path goes through a symlink, and then you do an atomic move of the symlink to.
Yeah, I don't know if it resolves symlinks or not. Like
I was told by the ops guy at our previous job that that symlinks didn't work because APC could get stuck on the old version.
Oh.
So our proposed solution, which was not implemented by the time I left, was to do it the heavy way and turn off the web server, take it out of rotation first, turn it off, then do the sync, then turn it back on, which would take ages. So yeah, we didn't use symlinks because we knew they would poison the cache in some way. So it's not a silver bullet.
Yeah, that seems like it might be more reliable, taking the whole server out of rotation while it's being deployed to. But even then, you'd still have the issue sometimes of like the PHP is not consistent with like the bit servers, and like even if they're the same backend now, then you have the issue of like two app servers aren't consistent, and one of them is serving bits.
Yeah. So the SCAP process does take steps during when we're deploying a full new branch. The way that we set things up, we do basically do everything we can in our power to get the code there first before we tell the PHP and Apache layers that it's there and visible. But the sync.dir, sync file, swap deploys are kind of, you get what you get right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know why you do the big deploys the way you do. It's it can be a pain in the butt.
Yeah. So time check, 20 minutes.
Yep. About 10.
Yeah. So the other things we have on the list is looking at logs, Logstash, and related things. Matt also offered to do git deploy if we have time, but we might not have time at this point to switch gears. So. Anything else on your end, Max, for now?
No.
Okay. Then
I could show Kibana, but let me check if Kibana shows any private information. Oh, it shows an exception monitor, so no exception monitor for you kids. That's your.
Yeah, that's one of the. So just context there. Logstash does contain sensitive data because it's the raw exceptions and IPs and all that kind of stuff. So that's why it's not public like other things are in our infrastructure. So you need to sign an NDA to be able to see it. I guess, yeah, since this is currently publicly streamed, do we want to show it? Is there anything that is...
let me see, Fatal Monitor. Fatal Monitor also contains IPs.
Yeah, and the default Logstash, you'll see like page views and IPs with page views and.
Yeah, I once even saw database password in Spectre.
Yeah. So all right, there are these things. Go to the How to Deploy Code page on Wikitech. There are links to where there are logs on the servers and also Logstash. Logstash is the new hotness that is becoming more and more a go-to place. It's not complete yet, but that will be, it's in progress. If you have any questions about Logstash, Brian German, it's a front end to logs. They get consumed in Elasticsearch, and then Kibana is the thing that makes it pretty. It's a way for you to actually make sense of the logs as opposed to knowing grep foo and slicing and dicing your own way of making sense of the logs. So it is very useful if you want to see trends or anything like that. So check it out if you can. Poke around on it. You're not going to break anything. You're not going to cause any exceptions by looking at exceptions. So
Inceptions.
Inception exceptions.
You're talking about exception occurred while trying to log exception or something?
Right.
Yeah, I see that from time to time. It's very common when something's broken in the localization system because the page that says an error occurred needs an internationalization message for it to tell you that an error occurred in your language. And then
So
if there's an exception while retrieving messages, there will also be an exception while trying to retrieve the message that tells you there was an exception. Fortunately, at that point, we were clever enough to go, okay. But that is the 90% leading cause of that kind of confusing error message is if you get exceptions, if you break localization system.
Interesting. Okay. So aside from that, yeah, check it out. If you have any questions, let us know. There should be a good list of logs to look at and things to know about when you're looking at the logs during your deploy. Do it. Watch the logs as you deploy. It's not optional. And if you know of anything else specific for your situation, like you're deploying a new extension and you know what to look out for, that's why you're doing it as opposed to someone else. Make sure to look for those things. And if it's something that would be around for a while and has greater applicability than just your team, add it to the page. Please do add more interesting things to the Wikitech how to deploy code page. We want that to be living and useful for everyone. So in that light, after this training, the more of you that do a deploy, let me know the hard things that happened. Let me know the painful things. Let me know the things that you wanted instead, the logs that you wanted, the whatever, right? Because that's how we'll improve it. Right now we have old hats like Max and Roan doing the deploys who are used to painful situations, and this is 1,000 times better than that, but it can be 1,000,000 times better still. So yeah, that's my general ask of everyone after this training. So we have 15 minutes left now. Is there anything else that we need to cover? I'm not thinking of anything. Are there any questions left over from anyone? Any concerns?
So, is there any plan to automate some of this, and because it seems to me like you mentioned like when things go wrong, and it seems that usually when things go wrong is that you forget a step or you didn't do it right. How many steps in that process can there be where there's actually an issue that you didn't cause by the things you did, and where it's actually, you know, you really need to make a pause because maybe something's wrong with the code that you were about to deploy? So meaning how many steps would remain manual if we automated the rest?
Yeah, so yes, deployments is an ongoing topic of how the hell do we make this better. I've been working on and off for, oh my God, the last 6 months to clean up the SCAP scripts and the sync scripts. So in December, all of that stuff was a really interesting tangle of bash scripting. As of last Friday, it's about 97% Python that, at least to me, makes sense, and I think Ori thinks it makes sense too. And I would welcome anybody else to start poking around and looking at the repo for it and ask questions about, this doesn't make sense to me, I can't read it.
Yes, but let's port it to PHP.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Thank you, Max. So we saw that this cleanup of the scripts to not be a tangle of bash as a prerequisite before we started making larger changes in the system. But we do have some wiki pages. We ran an Etherpad for about a month or a month and a half earlier this year, and tried to gather a lot of requirements from different teams about what a better deployment system would look like. And stay tuned. We're going to keep trying to get closer and closer to something better.
Yep.
What about that backporting? Do those cherry picks have to be done to Gerrit, or can they be done
Yes, you can do them manually, but in Gerrit it's simply easier.
But I was thinking, like, if you're moving towards scripting more of that process, backporting to current branches seems like a place where you could save some time.
Yeah, it really could be. Some of that's about thinking about how we manage our workflow, and moving to Fabricator might change our ideas about some of that too. But we do really, everything needs to end up versioned in Git so that we can know what happened when, right? And right now, with Gerrit being part of the process, it's not incredibly awesomely easy to. There are ways to bypass Gerrit validating stuff, but they're not fun, and we restrict who can do that pretty tightly because you could, nuke things. Force pushes are scary, especially force pushes on repos that thousands and thousands of people have checked out.
Yeah, I wouldn't say you necessarily want to bypass Gerrit, but you might be able to script the process of creating the cherry-picked branches. In particular, it seems like one of the possible mistakes there is when you do the submodule update, you have to sort of create it in Gerrit, well, create cherry-pick once in Gerrit for each branch, which has a sort of magical name, and then cherry-pick a commit to the parent module that updates it to the right submodule. And so some of that you might be able to do semi-automatically with Git, right? Just have Git go in, do the cherry pick, and then push those things to Gerrit for you. It might save a couple button presses and a couple places you could get it wrong, but on the other hand, then you're doing it on the command line instead of in a nice Gerrit UI. So yeah, take the one half doesn't know another, I guess. I mean, for what it's worth, in Parsoid we have a couple of scripts that automatically make changes to the sync parser test and things like that, which work pretty well. Like, go in, apply our changes on the last version of core, do an automated git rebase onto the new version, and create a commit message in a standard format. So it is possible to automate some of that without cutting out Gerrit.
Yeah, that would be part of next year. I mean, it's not an explicit thing in our goals, but it's ongoing thing always is to find more pieces that we can automate easily, quickly, and safely. To put a name on the thing, Mukunda, and he's not there yet. He's still. I mean, this is like his third week or fourth week, so he's still ramping up. So don't push on him yet. But Jill, I know you have some ideas and you know who he is. So.
Well, he's seen the same things I have, so
yeah,
we really have the same idea of where we want to take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, like just before we walked into this meeting, Chad and I were discussing, and Chad brought up the idea of why don't we have more automation around the Git side of things that happen on Kin, and so I strongly encouraged him to sit down when he was bored and type out the commands that he would like to have run and tell me what they should do, and we'll try to figure out if we can make that happen.
Cool.
Like almost everything MediaWiki, be bold. If you've got an idea, bring it up.
Yes.
And you might get somebody who quickly tries to shoot you down, but you'll probably get 3 other people who go, huh, that's a pretty good idea. How do we fix that?
Or, as an alternative, start with committing your changes, get -2.
Yeah. So cool.
I have to go.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you guys for organizing this.
Yes.
And recording.
Yeah. So I don't have anything else on our list of things to talk about, and we don't have to stay here for 7 minutes if you don't have any more questions.
I can very briefly go through git deploy.
In 5 minutes. All right.
All right.
So context for what Matt's going to talk about. Git deploy is the other tool for deploying code. It's a little different use case. not what we use to deploy MediaWiki itself, but other tools like Parsoid and the new PDF tooling stuff is using it. So there you go.
Okay, so here I am on the deployment bastion. I'll start. Git deploy is a system of 3 components. One is git deploy, that's non-native to us. That's a component that sits on top of Git. There's a system called Trebuchet, which is an add-on to git deploy, which manages our integration between Gerrit and a local repository hosted on the deployment server. And then there's a component called Salt, which is configuration and metadata. It's also a remote execution environment. So git deploy communicates with Trebuchet and Salt to push out your changes via basically a Git repository update. So here I am on deployment bastion. If you're going to do this in production, it's 10. It depends on where you set things up in Puppet, but most things are, I believe all things are in some variant of server deployment. I'm familiar with OCG, so that's what I'll deploy. That's the PDF rendering. Git deploy is pretty simple conceptually. You git deploy start, which has a lock, so that creates a lock file. So if someone else was to try and git deploy start, they wouldn't be able to do it. Here, then you just do your normal git fetch, git update stuff, whatever you want to do, and then git deploy sync actually starts pushing that out to all the servers. So I've been having some problems lately with this.
Restart your question. That was needed.
That's fine. Let's see what that does. It appears like, so here we go. So this is pretty normal. Salt will time out, so 0 of 1 minions completed fetch. If you press detailed, that just queries the Salt metadata again, and it'll tell you if what actually failed or if what actually completed. So fetching just literally runs git fetch on the remotes. The next step after you press yes is going to actually be to do a remote checkout. So git checkout on the remotes. This will either time out or it will succeed. It'll be the same thing. It'll give me the same prompt. Do I want detailed yes, no, or retry? Retry will actually restart the process if you want to do that. There's no penalty necessarily, although if you do this too many times, you might corrupt Salt cache status, which is I think what happened to me yesterday. Recovering from that, I'll have to document, but great, it seems to be broken. Just try that again. Well, actually, so let's not. So if that had actually completed, it would have cleared the lock. Presumably, my deployment has now failed, so if I git deploy abort, that clears the lock and attempts to reset some state. At this point, because nothing was checked out on the remotes, nothing actually changed. So that's fine. However, git deploy has a bug where right now, oh well, I guess it worked. Sometimes it corrupts state locally, so you'd have to. It's nice if you git reset -- hard to whatever your expected state is going to be. Since everything we deploy with git deploy is non-traditional, i.e., it's probably some sort of service. We have another command that's git deploy service restart. Running this restarts remote services as configured in Puppet. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. That's why Parsoid actually has custom RSH and Salt rules to restart the services. And sometimes, in my case, I can actually restart OCG when it behaves itself, but today it's not. So that's the very quick 5-minute overview to deploy Trebuchet.
Awesome. Yeah, more on that later. There will be some grand future where we unify some things between git deploy and this gap tooling. So hopefully have something that's a little bit more easy for everyone to know, as opposed to learning two completely different tools. But it's two use cases, so it's always going to be a little different. But yeah, thank you for that. All right, so we have 1 minute left, and I have something at 12:30. So any last questions before we bail out?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and this will be posted, and when I get a life again, I'll send an email out and with URLs and stuff like that. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks to the presenters.
Yeah, thanks everyone.